From Pacifica, this is Democracy Now!
Mr. Snowden is not a whistleblower. He is accused of leaking classified information and has been charged with 3 felony counts, and he should be returned to the United States as soon as possible, where he will be accorded full due process and protections.
As the White House condemns Russia for granting Edward Snowden temporary asylum, the NSA's surveillance programs coming under increasing criticism in Washington from an unlikely bipartisan coalition. We'll speak with Republican Congressmember Thomas Massie of Kentucky and Democratic Congressmember John Conyers of Michigan on their efforts to stop the NSA from tracking every phone call in the United States.
It's my fear that we are on the verge of becoming a surveillance state, collecting billions of electronic records on law-abiding Americans every single day.
Then a national strike for a living wage and the right to unionize in the fast food and retail sector spreads across 7 cities.
Try to accomplish $15 an hour and the right to form a union without retaliation from our employees and respect on our jobs. We can't support our families on what we make, and we come together and try to form a union.
We'll speak with one worker who went on a strike. His father of 3. He works at both Burger King and Pizza Hut. All that and more coming up. Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. The Obama administration's reconsidering plans for a summit with Russian President Vladimir Putin next month after Russia granted a year of temporary asylum to National Security Agency whistleblower Edward Snowden. On Thursday, Snowden left the Moscow airport where he'd been sheltering for more than a month while the United States sought his return to face espionage charges for revealing NSA spy programs. In a statement released by WikiLeaks, Edward Snowden said, quote, "Over the past 8 weeks, we've seen the Obama administration show no respect for international or domestic law. But in the end, the law is winning. I thank the Russian Federation for granting me asylum," he said. A Russian lawyer for Snowden said he's set to begin a new life in Russia. We'll have more on Snowden and the latest NSA leaks after headlines with 2 members of Congress who are trying to defund the NSA's bulk collection of phone and data records, Democrat John Conyers of Michigan and Kentucky Republican Thomas Massie. The United Nations says Iraq has closed out its deadliest month in more than 5 years following a wave of sectarian bombings and shootings. In total, the violence killed 1,057 Iraqis and injured more than 2,300 in July. Many of the attacks focused on Iraq's Shiite majority, which leads the government. In Egypt, supporters of former President Mohamed Morsi are launching new protests today to call for his return to power almost exactly a month after he was ousted by the military. Despite a pledge by the interim government to gradually clear out Morsi supporters who've been occupying squares in Cairo, protesters said Thursday they will remain in place.
We will not evacuate this square until Mohamed Morsi is returned to power and legitimacy and the parliament return, that's all. Even if they come with tanks, we will remain peaceful. Our peacefulness is more powerful than bullets. Our peacefulness is more powerful than bullets.
President Obama and Yemeni President Abdurabu Mansour Hadi met at the White House Thursday and pledged to work together to repatriate Yemeni prisoners held at Guantanamo. Human rights groups criticized Obama for failing to lay out concrete steps for the transfers. Of the 86 Guantanamo prisoners cleared for release or transfer, 56 are from Yemen. The meeting between Obama and President Hadi came just hours after a U.S. drone strike in Yemen killed 4 people. A Yemeni security official said the victims were al-Qaeda suspects. It was the 3rd U.S. strike in Yemen in 5 days. Secretary of State John Kerry told Pakistanis on Thursday he hopes the U.S. will stop carrying out drone strikes in their country, quote, very, very soon. Kerry made the remarks in a television interview following a meeting with Pakistani Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif. He claimed President Obama has a very real timeline for ending the drone strikes. Meanwhile, an investigation by the Bureau of Investigative Journalism solidifies claims the CIA targeted rescuers at the scenes of earlier drone strikes in Pakistan. A report by a Pakistani journalist commissioned by the Bureau found 5 so-called double-tap strikes took place in mid-2012, one of which also struck a mosque. In total, the attacks killed 53 people and injured 57. A parallel investigation by the legal charity Reprieve found 8 civilians died in one double-tap strike in Pakistan last July. Afghan officials say a NATO helicopter that was called to assist Afghan police at a highway checkpoint opened fire and mistakenly killed 5 Afghan officers. A spokesperson for the governor in the eastern province of Nangarhar said the police officers had come under fire and called for air support from NATO. Spokespeople for the U.S.-led International Security Assistance Force in Afghanistan provided a slightly different version of the incident to the Associated Press, saying the NATO helicopter killed 5 Afghan soldiers during an operation involving both international and Afghan troops. They said an investigation is underway. The news comes as the U.S. Army has launched a new investigation into allegations that special forces have abducted and killed Afghan civilians. Afghan President Hamid Karzai briefly ordered a ban on U.S. troops in the province of Wardak earlier this year over claims of the abuse and disappearance of 9 Afghan prisoners. The U.S. military has denied involvement in the abductions, but has withheld the findings of an earlier probe. An Afghan translator recently arrested for his alleged involvement has accused the U.S. forces he worked with of committing the abuses. The translator, Zakaria Kandahari, says he knows of 3 Afghan civilians who were handed over to U.S. forces alive, only to later turn up dead. The United States is closing a number of its diplomatic posts around the world Sunday, citing unspecified security concerns. Deputy State Department spokesperson Marie Harf did not elaborate on the nature of the threat against U.S. facilities, but said it's possible some may remain closed for more than a day.
The Department of State has instructed certain U.S. embassies and consulates to remain closed or to suspend operations on Sunday, August 4th. The department has been apprised of information that, out of an abundance of caution and care for our employees and others who may be visiting our installations, that indicates we should institute these precautionary steps.
The United Nations says chemical weapons inspectors are poised to enter Syria after Syrian President Bashar al-Assad agreed to allow them to gather first-hand evidence for the evidence of alleged chemical attacks. The inspectors will investigate 3 sites of alleged chemical use, including one outside Aleppo, where at least 30 people died in March. The Assad regime and anti-government rebels each blame each other for the attack. On Thursday, the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights said a rocket attack by rebels on an arms dump killed at least 40 people in the central city of Homs. A prominent blogger has been arrested in Bahrain days after the ruling monarchy vowed to intensify a crackdown on anti-government protests. The blogger, Mohammed Hassan, has also worked as an assistant to foreign journalists visiting Bahrain. Earlier this week, the Bahraini regime backed a proposal to ban demonstrations in the capital Manama and impose penalties, including revoking citizenship on protesters convicted of violence. Uruguay is set to become the first country to fully legalize marijuana. The plan passed by Uruguay's lower house would create a state-controlled legal marijuana market where Uruguayans would be allowed to grow a limited amount of marijuana in their homes and purchase it from pharmacies after entering their names in a federal registry. The bill now goes to the Uruguayan Senate, where it's expected to pass. Uruguayan President José Mujica has touted the bill as a way to undermine the illegal drug trade, which he termed a monopoly of mafias. In Washington, D.C., dozens of immigrant leaders and allies were arrested Thursday after blocking a major intersection near the Capitol to call for the passage of comprehensive immigration reform as Congress prepares for summer recess. More than 40 people were detained, including some who are undocumented, as they protested Republican efforts to increase border security without providing a path to citizenship for millions of undocumented immigrants. Later in the day, more protesters were arrested for blocking the hallway outside alongside the office of Republican House Speaker John Boehner, who so far refused to take up a Senate bill that includes a path to citizenship. This week, Illinois Democratic Congressmember Luis Gutierrez noted 44,000 people will be deported before Congress reconvenes early next month. The Senate's confirmed Obama nominee Samantha Power is the next U.S. ambassador to the United Nations. Power served as Obama's senior foreign policy advisor during his first run for the White House before being forced to resign for calling Hillary Clinton a monster. She won a Pulitzer Prize in 2003 for her book A Problem from Hell, America in the Age of Genocide. Progressives have accused Power of selectively ignoring U.S.-backed abuses while supporting humanitarian intervention abroad. President Obama has tapped a retired corporate restructuring expert to oversee the Internal Revenue Service. John Koskinen oversaw the overhaul of mortgage buyer Freddie Mac following its near crash during the financial crisis and served as deputy director of the Office of Management and Budget under President Clinton. In a statement, Obama called Koskinen, quote, an expert at turning around institutions in need of reform. The IRS has faced scandal over its scrutiny of certain political groups who applied for tax-exempt status. An Ohio man who held 3 women captive for a decade while repeatedly raping them has been officially sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Ariel Castro pleaded guilty last week to hundreds of kidnapping and rape charges in the forced imprisonment of Amanda Berry, Gina DeJesus, and Michelle Knight, who all escaped in May. On Thursday, Castro delivered a rambling statement before his sentencing, apologizing to his victims, but also claiming they consented to sex with him. Survivor Michelle Knight confronted him in court.
Ariel Castro, I remember all the times that you came home talking about what everybody else did wrong and act like you wasn't doing the same thing. You said, at least I didn't kill you. You took 11 years of my life away, and I have got it back. I spent 11 years in hell. Now your hell is just beginning. I will overcome all this that happened, but you will face hell for eternity.
A federal jury in New York has found a former Goldman Sachs vice president dubbed the Fabulous Fab liable for fraud in a civil case over a mortgage-backed securities deal that cost investors $1 billion. Jurors found Fabrice Tour intentionally misled investors in the lead-up to the financial crisis by secretly working with a hedge fund on an investment scheme destined for implosion. One of the more notorious pieces of evidence was an email Tour wrote to a girlfriend saying, quote, the whole building is about to collapse any time now. The only potential survivor, the Fabulous Fab. Tour could now face a fine or be banned from the industry. Florida's rejected calls for an independent probe of the FBI's fatal shooting of an unarmed Chechen man questioned for his ties to the Boston Marathon bombers in May. Agents were questioning Ibrahim Todashev at his Orlando apartment when he allegedly tried to attack them. After multiple anonymous claims that Todashev was armed, it emerged he had neither a knife nor a gun. In a statement, the American Civil Liberties Union, which had asked for the rejected probe, said, quote, secrecy fosters suspicion, and the people of Florida deserve better than to be left without an explanation from their government about what led to a person being shot to death. And a federal court is weighing a bid by jailed civil rights attorney Lynn Stewart to obtain compassionate release from prison. A 73-year-old grandmother, Stewart's fighting stage 4 cancer that's metastasized, spreading to her lymph nodes, shoulder, bones, and lungs. She's serving a 10-year sentence in federal prison after being found guilty of distributing press releases on behalf of her jailed client, Egyptian cleric Omar Abdurrahman, also known as the Blind Sheikh. The Federal Bureau of Prisons recently denied her transfer to a hospital, despite the recommendations of her prison warden. In a new court filing, Stewart's attorneys write, quote, she's dying and her ability to function is rapidly deteriorating every day. On Wednesday, supporters in New York rallied outside a federal courtroom where the arguments in the case were heard. Robert Boyle, an attorney with Lynn Stewart's defense team, said he expects a decision as early as next week.
Lynn Stewart, even from the time she was arrested, even the government has never said she was a threat to anyone's safety. And so what really basis can they have in her condition to keep her incarcerated. It's inhumane. It's cold. It's all of that. I could go on and on, but I think I think that the judge today, in giving an expedited scheduling, is treating it seriously at a very minimum, and hopefully we'll do the right thing next week.
According to doctors, Lynn Stewart may have less than a year to live. You can go to our website at democracynow.org for our previous coverage of her case. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. President Obama and Vice President Joe Biden met with a group of top lawmakers on Thursday to discuss growing concerns about the National Security Agency's broadening surveillance powers. The meeting occurred just hours after Russia granted NSA whistleblower Edward Snowden temporary asylum for a year. Snowden was the source behind a number of recent leaks about the NSA's ability to conduct surveillance across the globe. Most recently, the Guardian newspaper revealed the existence of a secret program called X-Keyscore that gives NSA analysts real-time access to, quote, nearly everything a typical user does on the Internet, including emails, chats, and browsing history. The Guardian has also revealed the U.S. government has paid more than $150 million to the British spy agency, GCHQ, over the past 3 years to, quote, secure access to and influence over Britain's intelligence gathering programs. On Thursday, White House Press Secretary Jay Carney criticized Russia for granting Snowden asylum.
We are extremely disappointed that the Russian government would take this step despite our very clear and lawful requests in public and in private to have Mr. Snowden expelled to the United States to face the charges against him. Mr. Snowden is not a whistleblower. He is accused of leaking classified information and has been charged with 3 felony counts, and he should be returned to the United States as soon as possible, where he will be accorded full due process and protections. This move by the Russian government undermines a long-standing record of law enforcement cooperation that has recently been on the upswing since the Boston Marathon bombings.
Russia's decision to grant Edward Snowden asylum comes at a time when the White House is coming under intense criticism from an unusual coalition of Democrats and Republicans over the NSA surveillance programs. Last week, the House nearly passed a measure that would have prevented the NSA from using the Patriot Act to collect phone records of individuals who are not under investigation. The measure failed by a narrow 217 to 205 margin. The bill was written by Republican Congressmember Justin Amash and Democratic Congressmember John Conyers, both of Michigan. Meanwhile, a group of lawmakers, including Republican Congressmember Todd Rokita of Indiana and Democratic Congressmember Adam Schiff of California, have introduced a bill entitled the Ending Secret Law Act. This would require public disclosure of opinions from the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court. We go now to Capitol Hill, where we're joined by 2 Congressmembers, Democrat John Conyers of Michigan and ranking member of the House Judiciary Committee and Republican Thomas Massie of Kentucky, who co-sponsored the Amash-Conyers amendment to limit NSA surveillance. We welcome you both to Democracy Now! Let us begin with Congressmember John Conyers. You were the sponsor of this amendment. You co-sponsored with Congressmember Amash, a Republican of Michigan. Why now? What is it that you're calling for?
Well, we're calling for an end to this metadata of phone numbers of everybody in the United States of America without any regard for a criminal investigation going on or anything else, Amy. The point that we're aiming at is to have relevance, which is written into the Section 215 of the Patriot Act, be observed and adhered to, which it wasn't, because what they're doing is creating a haystack in which to put a needle.
Congressmember Massie, the Republicans and Democrats are not usually known for working together these days in Washington. Now, this was nearly passed, this amendment. Talk about your concerns around NSA spying.
My concerns deal with the oversight of the programs and the reporting to Congress and the reporting to people. In March, we had the Director of National Intelligence come to Congress, to the Senate, and tell us that this program did not exist. Yet last week, we had the head of the NSA here lobbying to fund the program. And so what we need is more oversight. They can't both maintain that the program doesn't exist or tell us lies in Congress and then ask us to fund them. Specifically, what we need is more visibility into the FISA court rulings. We understand the need for secrecy and ongoing investigations, but we need to know how the FISA court is interpreting the laws that Congress has written. We need oversight over that from Congress, and we need redacted and declassified versions of those FISA court rulings for the public.
Congressmember Massie, what are your thoughts about Russia granting temporary asylum to Edward Snowden, who really started this ball rolling by revealing what the intelligence officials of this country, from Keith Alexander to James Clapper, have long denied, but now admitted they weren't telling the truth about, that the U.S. is spying on American citizens?
Well, clearly his disclosures have changed the course of human history, really. And I think his initial disclosures were a service to our country, because now we're having this conversation, and we wouldn't be having this conversation. I can't speak for Mr. Snowden's actions now. He's basically a person looking out for his own life at this point. But what he did initially was a service to our country. We need to facilitate a way for whistleblowers to do that in a better fashion. And I don't think our current whistleblower laws would have provided for him to do what he's done in a better fashion. So I'd like to see some reform there as well.
Do you think Russia was right to grant him temporary asylum?
I'm not going to comment on what Russia should have done with Mr. Snowden.
Mm-hmm. But do you feel that Mr. Snowden did the right thing?
I think initially he did, and now it would be hard for me to fault his actions at this point. He's a person who fears for his life, and so, you know, he's doing what he can, I think, to stay alive at this point.
I want to turn to.
And I don't. By the way, I don't think our government really wants to try him. It would be a difficult trial, and I think more things would be disclosed in the process of the trial. So it's not clear to me that we've actually done everything we could to get him back here and try him. There may be another story there as well.
Congressmember Conyers, do you think NSA whistleblower Edward Snowden did the right thing?
Well, I think that he was overzealous and probably didn't. He's clearly broken some laws for which now the government wants to prosecute him for. But inadvertently, he's revealed to us a whole area of secrecy and activity with telephone collections and other things that are now being revealed that would not have been revealed otherwise.
Can I just add that some people say he should have come to a congressman with this information, but there are actually probably 20 or 30 congressmen that already knew about this program, and if he had went to them, I think we wouldn't be having this discussion, and he may already be in jail without the disclosure happening.
I want to turn to President Obama. During an interview with Charlie Rose in June, President Obama dismissed fears the NSA's bulk collection of metadata could potentially be abused.
The very fact that there's all this data in bulk, it has the enormous potential for abuse, because they'll say, you know, you can, when you start looking at metadata, even if you don't know the names, you can match it up. If there's a call to an oncologist and it's a call to a lawyer, and you can pair that up and figure out maybe this person's dying and they're writing their will, and you can yield all this information. All of that is true, except for the fact that for the government under the program right now to do that, it would be illegal. We would not be allowed to do that.
Congressmember Conyers, your response?
Well, of course it would be illegal. That's the whole point that's being made, is that we're not using relevancy in this matter at all, and that's part of the statute. Unless there is relevancy considered, we're on fishing expeditions which are improper and probably illegal. Now, having said that, we've been offered a peek into what we didn't know anything, most of us didn't know anything about. And so I think we should look at more transparency. The makeup of the FISA court, as you know, Amy, most of those are Chief Justice Roberts handpicked appointees to the court. And I think that there's going to be a lot of follow-up and more legislation and oversight than there's ever been before.
I mean, the Obama administration brought out the heavy hitters, and I was wondering, Congressmember Thomas Massie and Congressmember John Conyers, if you could describe what the scene was like on the legislation that you co-sponsored, Congressman Conyers, with Congressman Amash. I mean, you had the head of the NSA, you had Intelligence Chief James Clapper, coming to the House members to say defeat this, and yet it was so close.
Well, it was 7 votes would have made the difference, and to be honest, we didn't know that we were that close to victory. I had sent out dear colleague letters urging that Amash Conyers' amendment be supported, and they were panicked by it. It was a signal that even in the partisanship that goes on too much around here, that there are people willing to say enough is enough. The law isn't, the Patriot Act isn't being followed. I didn't support the Patriot Act, but the Patriot Act would have gone down if we had known that this was going to be part of its program.
You know, on the floor of the House, you had the House Majority Leader, you had the Speaker of the House, and the House Minority Leader all got up in really unprecedented fashion and spoke, in favor of keeping these NSA programs going. And I was more optimistic, I think, than my colleague here that it could pass. I think the straw that broke the camel's back was when the president came out. And I'm not blaming the Democrats, because more of them voted in favor of the Constitution and freedom on this issue. But really, when the president came out and gave that extra little nudge, I think it hurt us on the Democrat side. But I would defer to my colleague on that. More of his members voted the right way on this issue than my members.
We're going to break and then come back to this discussion. We're talking to 2 Congress members, Republican Congressmember Thomas Massie of Kentucky, Democratic Congressmember John Conyers, ranking member of the House Judiciary Committee. They are in Washington, D.C. at the Capitol. Stay with us.
Один солдат на свете жил, красивый и отважный, но он игрушкой детской был, ведь был солдат бумажный. Он переделать мир хотел, что был счастливым каждый, а сам на ниточке висел, ведь был солдат бумажный. Он был бы рад в огонь и в дым за вас погибнуть дважды, но потешались вы над ним, ведь был солдат бумажный. Не доверяли вы ему своих секретов важных. А почему? А потому, что был солдат бумажный. А он судьбу свою кляня и тихой жизни жаждал, и все поросил огня, огня, забыв, что он бумажный. Погоня, что ж, иди, идешь, и он шагнул однажды, и там сгорел не за грош, ведь был солдат.
The Paper Soldier by the famous Russian poet, novelist, singer, songwriter Bulat Okjava. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. We're going to turn now to Edward Snowden in his own words. In his first interview with the Guardian newspaper, Edward Snowden described why he risked his career to leak the documents.
I think that the public is owed an explanation of the motivations behind the people who make these disclosures that are outside of the democratic model. When you are subverting the power of government, that's a fundamentally dangerous thing to democracy. And if you do that in secret consistently, as the government does when it wants to benefit from a secret action that it took, it'll kind of give its officials a mandate to go, hey, tell the press about this thing and that thing, so the public is on our side. But they rarely, if ever, do that when an abuse occurs. That falls to individual citizens, but they're typically maligned. It becomes a thing of these people are against the country, they're against the government. But I'm not. I'm no different from anybody else. I don't have special skills. I'm just another guy who sits there day to day in the office, watches what's happening, and goes, this is something that's not our place to decide. The public needs to decide whether these programs and policies are right or wrong. And I'm willing to go on the record to defend the authenticity of them and say, I didn't change these. I didn't modify the story. This is the truth. This is what's happening. You should decide whether we need to be doing this.
That's Edward Snowden in his own words. Again, he has left the Russian airport. He has been granted temporary asylum by Russia for a year. The reports are, though it is not known where he is right now, that he met Americans online who offered that he could stay with them, and it's believed that's where he is right now, though we don't know all the details. We're joined by Republican Congressmember Thomas Massie of Kentucky and Democratic Congressmember John Conyers, ranking member of the House Judiciary Committee. In a lot of the media, a tremendous amount is made of how Republicans and Democrats are not cooperating at all right now. Complete breakdown on Capitol Hill. But here you both are, Congressmembers Massie and Conyers, standing together. And it's not just the two of you. You're not outliers. This legislation, the growing Democratic-Republican criticism of the intelligence state now is increasing. And I was wondering, Congressmember Massie, if you could explain what the next step is. You have the amendment that was defeated by just a few votes to stop the funding of the NSA spying on American phone calls. What is H.R. 2399? What's the next step?
Well, I'm not sure what the number is, but there's a bill called the Liberty Act. That's a very good bill that I believe Congressman Conyers is on, and Justin Amash, that would raise the threshold and require that there's some reasonable suspicion, articulable reasonable suspicion, and also would give us more transparency, Congress, more transparency into the goings-on of the FISA court. That bill, we're hoping, because of the public outcry, will get a hearing, at least in the Judiciary Committee, and it should possibly get a hearing in the Intelligence Committee. And that's what we need. We need more hearings on this, hopefully a markup, and bring that bill. This measure barely failed, the amendment barely failed by 7 votes. I think if the vote were today and the members who voted no could do it over, I think this amendment would pass, because they misjudged the public outcry on this issue. And you played a tape of Mr. Snowden, and the one thing he said that I do agree with is that the public deserves to know about this program. And the public does know about it. The public knows how their members voted last week, and that will give us the momentum to get these standalone bills like the Liberty Act passed.
Congressmember Conyers, 2399, can you explain the new standalone bill you're co-sponsoring?
Well, what we're really trying to do is make sure that there's relevancy observed and that it's made clear that we cannot massively collect metadata on everybody in the country. This is what's alarming people, and this is why we have the wind at our backs now, because people are concerned about it. During the August recess, there'll be town hall meetings all over the place on this. And people will be learning what we couldn't have learned otherwise. Now, the person that leaked it may be an overzealous a leaker. I don't think he had criminal motives, but he sure violated the law. And the Judiciary Committee, which I think our Chairman Goodlatte will be willing to hold these hearings in the fall when we come back to tighten up the law and make it clear. that if a person is not involved in any suspicious activity, they shouldn't be, their names or their phone numbers shouldn't be collected.
I want to turn to NSA Director Keith Alexander, speaking last year at the Aspen Security Forum. He was questioned by NBC's Pete Williams about the NSA's collection of data on Americans.
I want to ask you one other question about privacy, and read to you a statement from a former NSA employee named William Binney, who recently told a hackers conference that the NSA is putting together dossiers on every U.S. citizen, listing who we have relations with, what our activities are. Is there any truth to that, and why do stories like this persist, that you're spying on all of us?
Yeah. First of all, it's not true. We aren't putting dossiers up on every U.S. citizen. In fact, we don't have a dossier on you. I've never seen one of your emails from an intelligence perspective or otherwise, actually. So from my perspective, these are grossly out of the truth. They really are. To think that we would be collecting on every U.S. person, one, that would be against the law. Two, we get great oversight by all branches of the government. You know, I must have been bad when I was a kid. We get supervised by the Defense Department, not just the General Counsel, by the DNI, their General Counsel, so they see everything that we do, by the Justice Department, by the White House, by Congress, SISI, HIPSI, and by the court. So all branches of government can see that what we're doing is correct. And so my concern is that false statements like these seem to persist, and you see those bounce around. And it only hurts because people think, well, they must have something there, and there must be some element of truth there. And from my perspective, when you walk all the way through this, the reality is Congress knows we're not doing that. All branches of our government see that we're not doing it, and all of them can audit it. So from my perspective, it's, you know, I would add that to Bill McRaven's. Not only should we stop leaks, but we should stop reporting this is clearly not right.
Congressmember Conyers, your response to that's the director of the NSA, General Keith Alexander.
Well, Mr. Alexander told so many whoppers in one statement that it's hard to recount them all. First of all, this information isn't available to anybody. We only got it through a person that took it improperly and made it public. So the whole idea that they're not doing this, I hope that, well, I don't suppose he can announce a way to modify what he said, but it's clearly untruthful from beginning to end.
Congressmember Massie, I'd like you also to respond. And also, just as the Obama administration brought out the heavy hitters to defeat any kind of curtailing of the NSA's spying mechanism last week, the establishment Republicans almost came out. You're a new Congress member. You were elected in 2012. You have, for example, Senator McCain hitting the lot of you very hard who are saying that the NSA has to be, what they're doing has to be modified and surveilled itself.
Well, let me go back to whether these people should keep their jobs or not. You could probably parse General Keith Alexander's words, and somebody could argue that he wasn't lying, but I would say that he was definitely misleading the public on that issue. But the Director of National Intelligence, James Clapper, was here in March and unambiguously lied to Congress. And I believe he was under oath, and it really sets a bad precedent for the whole organization to let him keep his post. I think he should be relieved of his post for lying to Congress. He could have picked other words to say. He could have said that I can't comment on that. Instead, he chose to lie to us in a hearing.
Could he be brought up on charges of perjury?
Well, look, if this were any American citizen or civilian, they would certainly be prosecuted for what he just did. At a minimum, he should lose his post.
Do you agree with that, Congressmember Conyers?
Yes, ma'am, I do, completely. And I think we're now at the point of having more honest disclosure of what's going on in our intelligence community, which we now find was very deliberately ignoring parts of the law that they knew perfectly well they were violating.
Just a point of history, Roger Clemens was brought up on perjury charges for lying to Congress in 2008 around steroids. I mean, this seems to be a key area. In fact, Clapper himself admitted that he did not tell the truth.
Look, if we accept the premise that it's okay for government to lie to us, or for one branch of the government to lie to the other branch of the government in order to protect our public safety, then we've crossed the threshold. We cannot accept that it's okay for government to lie to us to protect us.
Yes. We can't turn into a surveillance state trying to protect these kinds of conduct that we all know is improper and probably illegal.
Do you sense something very different than we're getting in the media, that there is a bipartisan convergence now that's happening that isn't getting reported, that the Obama administration is deeply concerned about? And do you have a sense that they are shifting here, that they're feeling the pressure?
I think that they might be, because I was in the White House yesterday, full disclosure, and the President of the United States said that he was going to give me a call, and I'll be looking forward to that call. And they know that things are happening, but you know, we frequently work together on issues, but they don't get reported or disclosed. There is bipartisanship at times. We're trying to improve it, and I think that we're moving into a better environment in the House of Representatives.
I agree, and I can also say that yesterday we were briefed in a classified briefing by General Keith Alexander, and his tone seemed to be a lot more conciliatory and a lot more open, because they realize if they're going to keep these programs around, or some form of these programs, they've got a public relations problem to deal with and a relations problem with Congress, both parties of Congress.
Exactly.
Before we go, Congressmember Conyers, I wanted to ask you about Detroit and the declaration of bankruptcy. Do you feel the federal government should bail out Detroit now?
Well, I don't know if we're in a position to do that. What we're doing in the Michigan congressional delegation, Democratic, is looking at a whole list of programs that would assist Detroit. And what we're trying to determine is whether we've applied for them first, and secondly, whether there's any possibility of benefiting from them. And the thing that we're most concerned about is protecting the pensions of those people who've worked 30, 40 years for the city. And fortunately, pensions are constitutionally protected in the Michigan Constitution. And again, we have bipartisan support. The Attorney General of Michigan, a Republican, has come out in support of protecting the pensions. So we're down, but we're not out, and we're going to rise again.
Well, I want to thank you both very much for being with us. Republican Congressmember Thomas Massie of Kentucky, elected in 2012. Democratic Congressmember John Conyers, ranking member of the House Judiciary Committee. And we will certainly continue to follow the legislation that you are introducing. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. We'll be back in a minute. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. This week, a national strike for a living wage and the right to unionize in the fast food and retail sectors has spread across 7 cities. Hundreds of workers have walked off the job yesterday in Milwaukee, before that in Chicago and St. Louis and Kansas City, Detroit, Flint, Michigan, as well as here in New York City. For more, we're joined by one of the workers, Terrence Wise, who works at both Burger King and Pizza Hut and is a member of Stand Up Kansas City. He's joining us from KCPT, Kansas City Public Television. And here in New York, we're joined by Josh Idelson, who covers labor issues for The Nation and also a contributing writer at Salon.com. His latest piece for Salon is Fast Food Strikes Intensify in 7 Cities. Josh, talk about this expanding, massive protest that's taking place.
So this is by far the largest strike by fast food workers in the history of the United States. It comes less than a year after the first big strike by fast food workers anywhere in the United States. And it demonstrates a real escalation in this campaign. It's a dramatic showdown between an embattled labor movement and an industry that increasingly not only is prevalent in the United States economy, but really represents where jobs are going in the United States economy. Organizers estimate that somewhere between 2,000 and 3,000 workers at least have gone on strike this week. This is a mammoth industry, and so it's not one that's going to concede quickly. And so we're going to see this continue to escalate.
And talk about who is organizing these protests.
So the most significant player behind all of this is the Service Employees International Union. It has lots of fingerprints on this effort. It's been working in coalition in each of these cities with local groups, progressive organizations, some of the descendants of ACORN, what I've called alt-labor groups, other kinds of non-union groups that mobilize workers, clergy. I talked to an organizer in Chicago who said, we went out to talk to people about fare hikes and the cost of public transit, and we kept hearing back from people, well, I could afford that if I got paid more in my job. And so you've seen this coalition effort that is going to become more common, but the key player in the funding and the strategy here is SEIU.
I wanted to turn to some of the workers who've been out in the streets here in New York, protesting outside of, fast food joints from McDonald's to Burger King to Wendy's.
I have 2 kids, 6 and 12. Both of my boys graduated kindergarten and 5th grade at the same time this year. My general manager told me that he was going to give me some extra opportunities to make some money, extra days. He calls me on my day off, and 3 days after that, every day, a different manager sends me home. At the end of the week, I only get a paycheck with 28 hours. I didn't have enough to do anything for my son. More or less just buy balloons or take him out to a pizza shop. I couldn't really celebrate his graduation because I didn't have any money.
They're not going to give us what we want, and we're going to stay in poverty. We're going to keep on suffering. I know you're tired of suffering. I don't want to see the next generation suffering and suffering. I don't want my kids suffering. I want to make sure they have a better future than I did. So if I want that to happen, I need you guys to stand with me just as long as I'm standing with you guys to fight for this 15 union and a better living wage in New York City, because it's not right. So we got to do something about it.
That's Nicasia Legrand and Kareem Starks, 2 workers here in New York. Josh, can you talk about how the living wage campaign fits in with the minimum wage campaign? President Obama this week speaking for support of the minimum wage, increasing the minimum wage, $7.25. But they're not talking about this. They're talking about doubling that.
Yeah. People ask whether a $15 minimum wage or a $15 wage floor for the fast food industry is realistic. From one angle, what the workers are demanding is a more realistic alternative to what Obama has put forward, because the president repeatedly has said that if you work full-time, you shouldn't be in poverty. Having a $9 minimum wage would be an improvement, but it wouldn't get us there. $9 still has people in poverty. We have seen that having these workers out on strike has created momentum that politicians have jumped onto. The Congressional Progressive Caucus has been rallying and picketing with these workers. It's shifted the national debate in much the way that organizers note didn't happen when labor was pushing for labor law reform a few years ago. There wasn't the massive critical mass of workers in motion that would have created more momentum behind that effort. So the workers are pushing for change in the workplace, but But absolutely, having these workers out, forcing attention to their struggle by being on strike has played some role in creating more political attention to poverty in the United States.
How does this blend with the Walmart campaign? You know, the Our Walmart campaign, which you've been covering extensively, of course, which led a strike in June. We spoke with Walmart worker from Louisiana who participated. This is Brandon Garrett.
We're both from Baton Rouge, Louisiana. We worked in the Baker store, store 1102. We went on an unfair labor practice strike in early June, and when we came back from our strike, we both were fired for going on strike. But they just told us we missed a certain amount of days, which were the days that we went on strike. So that's the reason for them firing us. But we all know doing the unfair labor practice strike is against the law for them to actually fire us. So we told them about it at the time of the situation, but they say they do not recognize us as strikers, so that's why they was terminating us.
And that was Brandon Garrett, who worked at Walmart. Josh.
So our Walmart, as I've reported for The Nation, is a union-backed, non-union group demanding changes in wages and working conditions at Walmart. And what he's describing is the greatest wave of alleged retaliation against workers by Walmart for organizing that we've seen at least since 2005. There are now 60 workers who went on strike last month who've been disciplined in some way, allegedly retaliation, and it represents a major threat to that campaign. One of the things we've seen in the fast food campaign and at Walmart is workers attempting to defend workers who allegedly were retaliated against for collective action with more collective action. So on Friday night, before the big strike wave started this week, we saw workers at Domino's walk off, reportedly 90% of the workers on that shift, in defense of a worker who had been fired. That challenge of retaliation is the biggest challenge facing these campaigns, which are taking on industries that increasingly not only represent inequality in the United States, but represent the face of work in the United States.
Josh Idelson, talk about the McDonald's sample budget.
So this is a document that was put out by McDonald's and together with Visa, which was a guide to workers to how to do budgeting. And it brought a lot of mockery on McDonald's, understandably, because what it shows unintentionally is that you cannot survive in a dignified way, in a decent way, on the budget of a full-time job at McDonald's. So in this budget, someone had 2 different fast food jobs and still had no money in the budget for heat, no money in the budget for clothing, $20 for health insurance. The truth is, there is no budget that McDonald's could have created that would have worked because the average worker in the fast food industry makes around $9 an hour.
We're joined by Terrence Wise in Kansas City. I know there's a big storm happening in Kansas City right now, rough weather. He works both at Burger King and Pizza Hut. This week, one of the workers who went on strike as part of this nationwide push by fast food workers to demand an increase in wages to $15 an hour with Stand Up Kansas City. Why did you go out this week?
Well, I felt over the past year or so, I've noticed my jobs have been on the decline. I recently lost my home last year, and we've been pretty much taking whatever our jobs have been handing us. It's like a dictatorship when we go to work every day. So I feel now is the time for not only me, but all workers all across the nation to stand up and speak out and come out of the shadows and let the public be aware of how we live our day-to-day lives, which is very poorly, and there needs to be change.
Terrence, talk about how you live your daily life. You work both at Burger King and Pizza Hut. Talk about your typical week and talk about supporting your family.
Well, I have 3 lovely daughters and an equally lovable fiance, and I'm working 2 jobs at about 50, 60 hours a week. So I'm leaving in the morning. I left home this morning, and my daughters will still sleep, and when I get off tonight, they'll probably be asleep again. So it's consecutive days where I don't get to see my daughters, and that's damaging to raising my family. That's one element that's really the hardest, and it's just everyday hustle. I use public transportation every day, so I have to leave early to get to work, so I'm gone 15, 17 hours a day. It's just really hard, a struggle every day.
How much do you make, Josh?
I make
Terrence.
$7.47 an hour at Pizza Hut and $9.30 an hour at Burger King, where I've been working for 8 years.
You know, a lot of times the media characterizes fast food workers as high school kids earning an extra buck. Tell us the reality of you and your coworkers.
Well, we all know that where I work in both of my shops, I look around, there aren't high schoolers. There are people with families trying to raise families. And so the whole notion that this is for high schoolers or someone trying to buy their first car or college students trying to get a little extra spending money, that's all nonsense. We're raising families, we're doing hard work, and we deserve to get a living wage for what we do.
What was the response of your employers to you stepping out, to you striking at both companies?
Well, I focus on my coworkers, and they were inspired and empowered, and they're proud of all the workers across the nation for stepping up and speaking out. And what else do we have to lose, Amy? I mean, we're already dying slowly in our day-to-day lives, so why not speak up and stand up and let the nation know that we're suffering? And this is really a cry for help. And this great nation shouldn't turn their back on working-class people who need help.
Finally, Josh Idelson, what would it cost for these companies just double the wage, like to $15 at minimum, for all of the workers? You have Wendy's, makes something like $4 million every couple of months, the CEO.
So the way that the companies respond is to talk about the business model for the individual franchisees and their profits, but that really obscures the situation. This is what I've called the who's the boss problem. It's the corporations that set the business model, not these individual franchisees that they hire to be the legal employer of the workers. When it comes to the corporations, McDonald's has doubled its profits in a 4-year period, $5.5 billion in 2011. So there's tremendous profit, there's tremendous wealth being created by these workers. But those corporations are not going to share it with those workers unless they're forced to. And that's why these workers are using a combination of media, political, legal pressure, and strikes to try to change it.
We have to leave it there, but we certainly will continue to cover this story. Josh Idelson, thank you so much as well. To our guest,